Okay, hello everyone. This is Dr. Tamisha Price Brock, and I am with you today for a short segment on improving math skills in our music majors. This topic is coming as a result of challenging performance of our students on the Praxis core exams, the math portions, and other challenges that we face with math and with our music majors, especially some of our music majors that are, students of color or students, some of our HBCU students. But I'm sure that this problem is common everywhere. So I'm not just targeting HBCU. So I want to make that clear first. The main reason for this brief webinar today is to make sure that we understand strategies and ways that we can help our students, all students, especially music majors, improve their math skills and their math performance on the Praxis core exam and any other standardized tests that they take that require a general math component. I'm pleased to be joined today by Dr. Andrew Nguyen, one of the math professors at Virginia State University. Dr. Nguyen, thank you for being with me today.
Oh, yes. Thank you for having me.
Indeed, could you give everyone just a brief background of yourself and of your work at Virginia State?
Sure. Good morning again to everybody. My name is Dr. Andrew Nguyen, and I actually did attend Virginia State for both undergraduate and graduate school. My undergraduate major was computer science, and I had a minor in mathematics. And then I completed my master's in math education at VSU. And then I went on to get my doctorate from Liberty University in curriculum and instruction. I've been teaching full time at VSU since 2011. And before that, I taught for 7 years at Petersburg High School. I taught math there as well. At VSU, I've been teaching a variety of courses in math and math education to both, math majors, engineering majors, but then also the liberal arts majors to students who want to be teachers, elementary ed majors as well. So I've taught anything from college algebra to pre-calc, trigonometry, statistics, numbers and operations, algebra and functions on the math ed side. And then I do a problem solving seminar for math majors. I've also done a lot of review classes and praxis boot camps for both those math majors who need to pass the Praxis 2, and then also for those who need to pass the core exam.
Thank you. Wow, you mentioned teaching statistics and brought back a flashback because I didn't take statistics until my PhD program. And
Oh, yeah.
surprisingly, I passed all the courses with an A, but I was extremely terrified of taking statistics or anything past, trigonometry or calculus, anything like that. So,
Sure.
indeed, thank you for that intro. And it's so amazing that you mentioned your work with Praxis boot camps, both for your math majors and then for general majors who sought assistance with the Praxis core. One thing
Sure.
I've always loved about our institutions, no matter what institution it was, is that many of our institutions nationwide offer some type of computer lab or training lab assistance for students taking the Praxis exam and other standardized tests. I know back in the day, it used to be called the Plato Lab at Virginia State University when I was an undergrad there. Of course, the name has changed now, but I'm sure that the essence of what the lab does and what they provide is still the same and on the same mission. Um, a question for you as it relates to, and even though we're talking about music majors, a lot of what we say today can generalize to all majors and all departments.
Sure.
But music majors especially, I do a lot of work with music majors that are working to pass the Praxis too. But I always get the question, well, do you also tutor for Praxis core? Because I'm struggling with the math portion. And I
Sure.
indicate that that is a broad area, not that I have tutored for it in the past, but I stopped because the demand was greater for students not being able to pass Praxis 2 and needing to
Sure.
get that license. But I will be returning to offer Praxis core tutoring this summer, and I'm seeking to start training people to kind of do that training for me because I'm just one person, and while the company is growing and our efforts are growing, I'm
That's
only
right.
one person. So it's kind of hard to try to do all of that myself. But
Sure.
looking at the music majors, the number one area, of course, we have some struggles with writing, but the number one area we just can't seem to get over the hump with is math. And
Sure.
so what are some challenges you think or challenges you have seen with students coming into college that would pose challenges for them on a standardized test like math?
Sure. And I think especially right now, during the pandemic with everything being virtual, there has been a big shift shift that I've seen, in student preparedness, because they come from all different types of environments, and everybody in every district didn't get the same amount of learning. So especially in the freshmen that we have this year, I'm seeing quite a few students who are prepared, but then I'm getting quite a few who may have only had 10 sessions during their whole spring semester where they were doing work. And so, the objectives that they should have gotten in those math classes when they were finishing high school, some of them just kind of missed. And so, I think that colleges have to definitely start looking at content recovery kind of things, because you don't want to put all of your students in remedial courses, because you want them to matriculate as fast as they can, and in a timely, expeditious manner, as Mr. Harden used to tell us,
Yes.
get through it, as fast as you can, but do it right. And so, I think that that's one of the big challenges that we're seeing now. But also, I think in math in general, that is one of the few areas where people accept the notion that I'm just not good in it. With other areas, people will tend to try to improve their skills. If they know, that there's a deficiency, they will take those steps themselves to try to get better. But with math, it tends to be, the acceptable kind of thing that I'm not good at math. And, parents even will encourage and say, I wasn't that good at math either. And so we get that fight. That we have to try to, push through it. But, I think one of the things that I've been working towards is trying to remove the stigma from math. And so, I've had people to tell me, oh, you don't look like any math professor I've ever seen. And, that's one of the things that we're trying to do, is to get more folks like us to work in the math fields, and even younger folks that can kind of take some of the intimidation factor out. And so I think that's one of the major barriers, even in math majors that I've seen, who want to go teach in high schools and that kind of thing. They had completed their courses, but they had such a lack of confidence in their abilities. And so, I think one thing when people think of these exams and they hear of all the people who have failed it before, teachers who are in service already who are still trying to pass their exams, they hear those stories, and it further promotes the stigma that this is going to be hard, it's going to be difficult. And so, that's one of the first challenges to overcome, is to get past that barrier of this is going to be hard. And so, a lot of it is understanding that the math that is in the core, for instance, only goes up through essentially high school mathematics. But for so many people, high school mathematics wasn't a good experience. And so, for folks who are trying to go back 5, 6, 7 years and remember material that they might not have learned that well before anyway, can be a challenge. And so, one thing that I will always tell people is start with the basic things. And, some things you would think are just, kind of beneath you at times, especially when folks have earned some credits towards degrees. They don't want to go back to elementary school math. But starting off with those things, like just relearning your multiplication tables, practicing some division, learning how to be proficient with your calculator. Because, folks will go through and they'll use a calculator and they'll say, well, I used my calculator, but the thing that they put in the calculator was wrong to start with. And so, they're starting off from a disadvantage even in those cases. And so one thing I would first say is, for anyone looking to improve their scores, go back to the basic things, go back to the elementary kind of concepts, going through order of operations, make sure you understand what it means, because I found that even a lot of teachers have shown students how to use order of operations wrong. So, they hear, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, and they think, okay, it's parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction in that order. That's kind of true, right? But then you got to recognize that multiplication and division carry the same weight, and it's whichever one you get to first on the line as you read left to right. And so some of those basic rules and skills, I think, is a great place to start before trying to get into like the algebra and the geometry. Just go back first and review some of those basic things. And so I guess, to start off, that's what I would say is, a very good starting point for folks who are facing these kinds of challenges.
Okay. Um, Great points. Great points. And that's, it's very interesting. You said a couple of key points. It is commonplace And I'm not sure, I can only speak from my experience as a professor at an HBCU, but I'm sure it happens commonly in other institutions as well, that we'll go in, we take the SAT or the ACT to get in. And regardless of what your score is, sometimes they have where if you reach a certain score, you're exempt from placement exams.
Right.
But we often just follow the routine we've been following for so long that if a student can't pass this parameter on our
Mhm.
placement exam, we immediately put them in remedial courses that do not count towards the degree instead of credit recovery or content recovery
Right.
courses. To kind of say, hey, it's not that you don't know anything. We just need
Right.
to bridge the gap, or we need to give you a stronger refresher or a stronger base to build upon. But you can perform in this level
Oh
class.
yeah.
We just need to do our jobs, and we need
That's
to
right.
meet you where you are. So I just think, rethinking, okay, because remediation, you got to think how many times when a student is bust down to remediation and I'm paying to
Oh
go to
yeah.
school and I'm paying for a class that's not going to count towards my degree. And that
That's right.
one, it automatically puts me almost a semester behind from matriculating to
That's right.
graduation. And then think for a music major, if I have to take remedial math or remedial English courses, and I got to take
Mhm.
remedial music courses like music fundamentals before I can start. Those are 3 courses already, almost
That's
what,
right.
9 credits, because most of those courses are 3 credit courses that I'm paying
Yep.
for. I'm just giving you money to repeat high school all over again.
That's right.
So
Yep.
I definitely feel that's a great point. And then the content delivery. You mentioned, sometimes, yeah, we may have learned the concept and it may have been taught incorrectly or incompletely. And I'm a witness that some of the concepts I was taught, in school, when I got to college, it was like, oh, that's what that is. It wasn't until I got to graduate school that a professor really knew what they were doing, really broke it down, and was like, okay, no, you had it right, but you didn't complete all of the steps. If you would have just did this, then it just made life
Absolutely.
easier. So I think, teachers, and we always, and I mentioned this in another webinar I did, we're always quick to say, promote lifelong learning. We as teachers
Mhm.
have to be willing to adapt and learn and
Absolutely.
question some of the things we've been doing too, and make sure we've been doing things correctly. Because a lot of times we're only regurgitating what we've been taught and we don't seek out the
That's right.
facts to say, hey, I want to make sure I'm teaching this not only correctly, but in a way that engages all learners and all learners
That's right.
can grasp the concept. It's not so much about we're so ready to mark up a page and give an F, but we're not considering the mastery learning. Can my student take
Right.
this, pass this test and take it and connect it to some other knowledge later on? So very good points, brought back a
Absolutely.
lot of memories, so definitely. Now, as it relates to, you also mentioned that the Praxis Core measures math almost just up to high school level math, which, I've been promoting that for years. I usually tell people, try to take the Praxis Core your freshman year, or that's something I would even use in lieu of a placement test. Let's
Oh
go ahead
yeah.
and give you the Praxis Core if you're an education major, because
That's right.
I've always looked at it as a graduated form of the SAT,
It
like
is.
taking the SAT over again.
That's
Um,
right.
so the only people who may have a challenge are maybe those who've taken the ACT. I've never taken the ACT, or I haven't seen the content either, but I'm assuming, that if it's not closely aligned, that those will be some of the students who may have some challenges. But
Sure.
I definitely agree, we have to make sure that those foundational skills are there. And I like what you said about going back to multiplication tables and, having, even remember in elementary school, we did those speed drills. You set the timer
Right.
and you had to fill out the pages and solve as many problems as you can. I think
Absolutely.
that while some people may feel it's beneath them, you'd be surprised how drilling your students on a college level can
Oh
actually
yeah.
help with timing and pacing on the exam,
That's
because
right.
another issue we have is running out of time because we spend too much
Absolutely.
time on a question. So going back to those basics, and it's almost like if it wasn't broke, don't try to fix it. We're
Right.
so into trying to push into 21st century learning that we forgot
Right.
some of the things from back in the day were actually working. So,
That's true.
but thank you for that. Okay, as it relates to, let's talk a little bit about the Praxis Core itself, because that's the heart of what we're trying to do. How much time do you feel a student should take to prepare for the Praxis course, especially if they're looking at math and having to review those formulas, and especially for someone who may have procrastinated a little and waited until
Sure.
junior year to take the Praxis course? How much preparation time is reasonable, do you think?
Definitely. So one rule that I try to go by, is to do at least 30 minutes a day. and then take 1 day off a week. So like normally in a week, I would probably say, do 30 minutes a day, maybe take Saturday off to refresh, and then start again Sunday evening and just do 30 minutes. And so with the core exam, the types of questions they will ask have a wide range. And so, it's not just one subject area. And so in your study, you can't necessarily focus on just one skill set. And because, there are so many versions of the test and iterations that come out, you can't just pinpoint. And so a lot of times I will get students who want to focus in on one area and they'll say, this is my weakness. And so, I will give them a question that's totally unrelated to what they ask and they'll get it wrong. And I'll
Mm-hmm.
say, okay, so you see, that sometimes numbers and operations part is really your weakness. And that's why you're getting the geometry wrong, because your numbers and operations part wasn't, as strong, or your, reasoning and quantity kind of things. So what I would say is, even in the areas that you feel you might be strong with, refresh yourself on those two. Don't, try to just look at the areas where you thought you were weak. Use all the different pieces to build together, because a lot of times in a question, they're not just testing one skill. They're usually
Mm-hmm.
testing multiple objectives at the same time to see if you can use the relationship with it. And then also, in their preparation, in those 30 minutes to an hour, I would say, daily, especially if you know that you were nowhere near the score that you needed, or if it's your first time taking it, I would say definitely, look over the variety of items that they have, but also focus in on the study guide that they give. And so, a lot of times the study guide has some generic kind of questions. And so you'll probably have to use other resources for your questions. But the objectives that are there and the strands that they are going to test is always something you should start with. And, make that checklist of, when I look at this strand, do I know what they're really asking me for? Because people will look and see, something like linear equations and think, okay, well, that's just, x plus 5 equals 10, something like that. Not realizing that a lot of times that will be an embedded problem, something that you have to pull out of a word problem, and you have to be able to construct the equation first before you can solve it. And so you have to realize, all that's really embedded into those. And so using, tools like Khan Academy, Kaplan, those kinds of websites, Teacher Test Prep, .com, and all those kinds of sites are definitely useful for pulling extra problems. And so I would say, 30 minutes to an hour daily per week up until, your test time. And as you get closer, maybe even increase it to an hour and a half.
Okay. Do you feel that 2 weeks is enough time to study, or 4 weeks or 6 weeks? What do you feel is a good time span? Like, because you have some people that are like, oh yeah, I want to take the test. I got to take the test. And they're trying to beat the clock of getting into the teacher ed program, or they're trying to beat the clock of,
Right.
getting a student teaching assignment. So
That's
they
right.
cram. So how long, how many weeks should we put
Sure.
into this?
So what I would say is try to give yourself a month. And so usually in the boot camp kind of things that I've done, they have typically been 1 to 2 weeks long. But I think that if you give yourself a solid month, and probably for the first 2 weeks, you go, you review all the different strands. And then for those last 2 weeks, that's when you time yourself, spend like the first 2 weeks just going through the material. Don't worry about the timing so much. But then when you get to that last 2 weeks before your test, start to use the timer and start to pace yourself. Now that you've reviewed the concepts in general, now you can kind of work on your speed and your accuracy for answering the questions. And so I would say, right at about a month should give most people a good chance. And then if you know that math is really, really a weak point, I would probably do 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Indeed. And that's great. I know, like, for the Praxis too, I've often told people, they've done research studies on this as well, that 4 to 6 weeks is usually a really good time frame to see really strong results, from those who
That's
are
right.
preparing for the exam. You see that the passage rate is higher with those who allow themselves at least 4 weeks, which is that month, to prepare.
That's right.
So, okay. Thank you. It's been a lot of great information here. Again, I wanted to bring Dr. Wynn on just to address some of the challenges and get us to think, outside the box as to what we can do to help improve the math performance of students and especially our music majors on the Praxis core exam and any other standardized tests that they have to take to complete their programs that require math. Finally,
Definitely.
to wrap out today, let's look at our music department. What are some things we can do as professors in our music departments to help support and help our students better prepare for this exam?
Certainly. So first thing I would say, is definitely encourage students to go to class. That I found, across the board for all subject matters. When students feel it's not their major, sometimes they feel like they can get by, and they feel like, oh, I've done math before. I can catch up. I can get the notes from somebody. But one thing that they don't realize is that if you're not there to see the progression of the notes, you're missing the concepts because notes are only going to show you the procedures. And, procedural fluency is good, but if you don't understand the concept behind what's being, done, then you're going to miss out. And so you will go through problems and not know when your answer is found. You won't know when you have the solution. So definitely first thing is go to class, right? And, even in situations where you might have other things that conflict with the time, choose the math portion, especially if you know that you struggle with math. Make sure that that is the first thing that you do. Second thing is, I would say encourage your students to ask for that additional help. Professors are required to do office hours, and so there are some professors, of course, who get busy, and they're not as approachable, but they still have the requirement that they are required to do office hours, and so that's those times where your students can come and ask those questions. And so if there's a concept, that they're struggling with, even if it's not something that we necessarily went over in class, come to the office hours, ask me, reach out to me, email me, and let me know that that's the area you're struggling with. And even if I can't get to you, I may be able to give you something to at least get you started until I can get you in. And so definitely, tell them to push and ask those questions. Third, I would say, encourage them to get with other music majors within the department and work together on doing, those kinds of things. And so, a lot of times when we have deficiencies, we get protective and we don't want everybody to know, be exposed to, the things that we're lacking in. But you have to get over that challenge and realize that, you have a goal to reach. And if you're really trying to get to your goal, you expose your weaknesses so that you can get better. And so definitely I would say encourage your students to work together, put together a math study group. And even if there's students who've already passed the course and can, give them some insights into what they did to get through it, and even provide a different type of explanation, because I know, that I may not explain a topic the same way that my students would explain it to someone else. And so hearing that variety of I guess perspectives on it gives your students a more complete picture of the math that they're trying to do. And then they can come back and reach out to me if there's some further clarity that they need to get.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Very good points, very good suggestions for, of course, creating those study groups within our departments. I would even go to say, partner, collaborate. We're
Yeah,
all talking about synergy and working together, and then together everyone achieves more. We have all these acronyms out there and it's sayings, but we need to actually live it and
that's
practice.
right.
So we need to also show our students that we're collaborating and we're interested in working as a team. I would even go so far
That's
as
right.
say, reach out to a math
Oh
professor
yeah,
department and see if there will be one or two math professors who be willing to come
definitely.
over and either team teach or come over and help run a boot camp in your department or come over and
Absolutely.
do a tutoring session one day a week or one day every other week,
That's right.
in person or in the virtual space.
Oh yeah,
Have all of your music majors go into a lab, have that math
that's right.
professor come on, and that way they have their undivided attention. And that way, too, they can tailor the concepts to what students would see on the Praxis exam. They can review those elements and they can make a connection in a way that the music
Mhm.
majors would get it. And then, of course, we always say music is math. This is our time
That's right.
to show it. So our music professors can take that content and relate it to
That's right.
something that students would encounter in math. For example, I did a session yesterday on secondary dominance. And I just mentioned that, if you're trying to realize what that equation is, five, that slash means of two, then
That's
just
right.
relate it to an equation. Okay. You're solving for X, you're solving
That's
for
right.
Y. You need to solve for two, solve for five, and then figure out what that chord is.
Yep.
So I think bridging those gaps and having common language, if they constantly hear that language and hear it infused throughout the degree program, I think they'll take the core classes and the general math classes a
Right.
lot more seriously. That
Absolutely.
in addition to what Dr. Wynn said about encouraging them to go to class. We're not, of course, we're not the class police or the truancy officers, but
Sure.
you do need to check in on your students, especially your music majors. You have a vested interest in seeing
That's right.
them through to graduation,
Yep.
especially if they're on some type of music department
Oh
scholarship.
yeah.
So, you want to have that added, investment. We know it's common in athletics. They have an
Hmm.
athletics advisor. They check on classes. They may monitor. They may walk through
That's
and
right.
see if you're in class. They may
Yep.
require their athletes to sit at the front of the room. So
Yep.
I'm not saying you have to be that stringent, but at the same time, you may want to adapt some of those policies for your music majors. And it's not saying that, you want to take away their freedoms, but you want to put them and give them every opportunity to be successful. So again,
Absolutely.
Dr. Wynn, I thank you so much for coming on today and taking time out of your schedule to share with us and to just help us think outside the box as to some key strategies we can start implementing or key considerations we can use to improve the math performance of our music majors. And of course, the information that Dr. Wynn shared can generalize to any department: criminal justice, engineering, language and literature, you name it, it can generalize to all areas. So again, thank you so much for your time, and be sure to tune in for my other webinars and tidbits of advice. So thank you all very much.